Hey guys, thank you so much for sliding on over to the Oscar Padron Show. With the Oscars coming up tonight, I just figured that it was time for me to finally get my top 10 movies of 2023. Now, since it's so late in the year, I'm probably only going to talk about each of these movies pretty briefly. Me and Marquez do have a review for a few of these movies on our channel, so I'll link those in the description, but we don't have reviews for all of them, unfortunately. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. For my honorable mentions, I have Evil Dead Rise, The Iron Claw, Skinamarink, Blue Beetle, Talk to Me, Killers of the Flower Moon, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which I do think they removed the Part 1 from the title. I think the next one's going to be just called something different. Dream Scenario, Zone of Interest, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Number 10. For my number 10, I have May December. Now, this is a movie that's about a dark tale, but it's also a slight satire because about how Hollywood kind of makes these movies about true stories or just talks about true stories in general, and they kind of sensationalize them because Natalie Portman's character in this, which I don't want to go into too many spoilers because I don't really know how much was revealed in trailers. I haven't watched them yet, but I feel like what the movie is about is a kind of a big reveal in early on in the movie, but still seemed like it was supposed to be a big reveal. So I'm not going to say what it's about necessarily, but the way Natalie Portman's character gets ready for this role that she's going to play in a movie that's within the movie, some of the things she does are just so cringy. But I say slight satire because I can honestly see some of the things that she does be how actual life in Hollywood, how they would go about doing these things. And I don't know, it just felt real, but at the same time was satirizing that side of Hollywood. And I'm surprised this wasn't nominated for any of the acting, or at least not that I can think of. Charles Melton especially was the standout in this movie for me because the character he has to play, which again, no spoilers, has a lot to him. And he truly made that character feel like someone who actually went through the things that he went through. The character did. And Julianne Moore was definitely on the top of my most disliked characters in the whole year. Number 9. Number 9, I have Beau is Afraid, and this is a movie that's really weird. It's not one of my favorite Ari Aster movies. The 3 that he's made is probably my least favorite of the 3, but I just loved the whole atmosphere of this movie. The way they captured this guy who has severe anxiety and extreme mommy issues was just so perfect. I do think they could have cut down on the runtime. It probably didn't need to be 3 hours. It did kind of lose me there a little bit in the middle of the movie. But overall, I thought it was just a really wacky, crazy time. Number 8. Number 8 is Poor Things, which is another crazy, wacky movie. I love Yorgos Lanthimos. I've loved all of his movies. Again, this is probably my least favorite that I've seen of his, but it definitely still has that flavor that I love from his movies. The weird dialogue, the weird way characters interact, the outlandish concepts, the sets were amazing. This sort of liberation of this woman who's learning how to be a person. And it honestly reminded me of this one book I had to read in elementary school called Flowers for Algernon. It was pretty different, but the concept was kind of similar in my opinion. It kind of reminded me of that. Number 7. Number 7, I have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I've loved the MCU post-Endgame. Well, I don't know if I'd say love, but I definitely like it more than a lot of people seem to. But I will admit they've had their fair share of missteps after Endgame, but this is definitely not one of them. This is definitely one of the best movies the MCU has had post Endgame by a pretty large margin. It's funny, it's emotional. The story of Rocket, the backstory that we finally got to see in this movie was heart-wrenching. Like, it literally made me cry in the theaters, which doesn't happen a lot in movies, and especially not in superhero movies. And the villain of this movie is definitely another character that's on the top of my most disliked characters of this past year, of a long time, honestly. Number 6. Number 6, I have Anatomy of a Fall, and this is a movie that's a crime mystery. It's handled so well with the dialogue. It keeps it so intriguing. Even though there's so much evidence that are pointing towards the main character, they still keep it enough of a mystery to where there's still enough doubt where it can't be completely pinned on her. And I read that the editor even said that if it ever got to where the main character seemed too innocent or too guilty, they felt it got too boring. So they try to keep a nice balance between the two. And overall, I think it just worked out really well and kept me intrigued throughout the entire runtime. And good job to the dog in the movie. Number 5. Number 5, I have Missing. And this is a movie I felt like was a really slept on movie. It came out really early on last year, and I think a lot of people kind of forgot about it, kind of forgot that it came out last year. This is made from the same people who made Searching, which came out a few years ago, and it's a similar concept to where everything in the movie is filmed from a camera, like an in-movie camera, like a webcam or a phone camera or a CCTV, stuff like that. But it's done so well to where it doesn't feel forced. It all flows together and it's all edited really seamlessly. And the twists and turns that are throughout this entire movie are really interesting and really keep you intrigued. And it really all builds up to a really satisfying climax. Like, I really loved the big reveals that happen at the end of the movie. Number 4, I have Past Lives, and on paper, this might seem like a really basic love story, but once it gets towards the middle of the movie, it really shows how authentic it is, because life is really complicated and relationships aren't always black and white. And honestly, it got to a certain point in the movie to where I really didn't know how it was going to end, and I didn't even know how I wanted it to end, because obviously in a movie like this, you want the two childhood lovers to get back together, but they make the third person in the triangle not the bad guy like you would see in a lot of movies like this. He's just like a regular guy. So it makes the whole situation really complex and complicated, and I really love that about this movie. And I've read that the director of this movie, she wrote this movie pretty much basing it on an actual experience that she had in her real life, where she actually met up with her childhood friend later on in life when she was an adult and she was married to someone else. And the three of them kind of just like had a conversation with each other, and she was translating for each person, and she was kind of the bridge between these two cultures, between these two people that were different chapters of her life. And there's even a scene in this movie to where it actually shows something like that, and it was actually a really cool moment and a really cool idea for just how this situation played out. Number 3, I have The Holdovers. I really love movies to where two characters who are very opposite, very different, and even enemies are put together in a very small confined area or space, and they're forced to start realizing how similar they really are to each other. It's one of the reasons why I love that episode of Star Wars Rebels where Zeb and Kallus are trapped together in this ice patch or whatever, this hole, and they're having to survive with each other. I just love that concept a lot whenever it's done well. And this movie definitely does it really well. It has a very strong 70s, 80s vibe to it. It's even shot to look like it was filmed during that time period. And the overall aesthetic makes it feel like a movie that was filmed way back ago. And honestly, if you didn't know that it was filmed recently, it's possible that you could actually probably think that it was filmed a long time ago. It's just a very wholesome, feel-good movie, even though the director doesn't like hearing that it's a very warm movie. That's what it really is. Number 2, I have Godzilla Minus One. I love Godzilla movies. I have since I was a kid. And I've even loved the legendary Godzilla movies, Godzilla 2014 and Godzilla King of the Monsters that came out in 2019. I wasn't a huge fan of Godzilla vs. Kong, but I was a fan of those first two ones. But this is just another level of greatness. This movie does something that a lot of people have complaints about Godzilla movies, to where it focuses on the human characters quite a bit. But the human story is just so great that it's not a problem with the movie. The main character, the plight that he goes through, the things that he has to overcome within himself, this war within himself of the shame of not doing what his government told him to do and not following orders in World War II, and the survivor's guilt from being one of the only survivors from Odo Island because he didn't do something that he felt he should have done. And then not to mention his country being destroyed during World War II and his parents dying in the explosions during the bombings. There's just so much PTSD that he has within himself that he has to overcome throughout this entire movie. And honestly, it all leads up to a climax of this movie, which no spoilers, but is honestly one of the most cathartic moments I had all year in a movie theater. But also, Godzilla is the most terrifying that he's ever been in a movie. There's a scene where he's chasing the main characters on a boat in the middle of the movie, and just his eyes are just so terrifying, and the way they played no music during that scene, and the special effects were just amazing. And they apparently made this with $15 million as a budget. It's just so amazing. It's just, if you care about something enough, then you can make something great. No matter how much money you have, no matter how much of a budget you have, you can still make something great if you put the care and work into it. I wish it was nominated for more than just best visual effects, because I really think it should have been nominated for best adapted screenplay, best picture, best actor. All of those should have been nominated for, but I'll take visual effects, even though it deserved a lot more. Number one, I have Oppenheimer, and this movie is just so fast-paced. It's a lot more fast-paced than you would think from a movie that's just about science. Christopher Nolan is just so great at keeping the pacing for his movies at just the right level to where they're really fast-paced, but they don't feel rushed. You can still keep up with it to a certain degree. There's enough slow scenes to fast scenes, and it's all edited together so well. So from the acting to the editing to the directing to the special effects, which were all practical effects, which, I mean, I won't say all because I'm sure there's some CGI, but probably 90% was practical effects. They actually recreated the Trinity test, which is kind of insane on a smaller scale, I'm sure, but still the fact that they actually recreated it to film it and not have to use CGI for it is just a testament to how much Christopher Nolan loves making these types of movies and loves putting all of his budget to use. This movie is a war movie. It's about World War II, but it doesn't have any of the action or any of the battles from the war. And it's just about science and them trying to create the atomic bomb. But it still feels like an action movie, which is just so crazy to even think about how they were able to accomplish that. All right, and that's it. That's my top 10 for the year, which I will put on the screen right now, my whole ranking list of all the movies I saw in 2023. So if there's a movie that you saw in 2023 that you liked and you didn't see it on this list and you don't see it on this full rank list, then it's because I didn't watch it. But that will about do it. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about my list, or even give me your top 10 for 2023 and your predictions for the Oscars, which hopefully I'll put this up in enough time before the Oscars come out. I'm really expecting Oppenheimer to win quite a bit, which I know I'm biased because it's my number one movie for last year, but I truly think it deserves a lot of the categories. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and you will see us later.